Eurobox presents Dragonflies, written by Anthony Caine. Dragonflies is a literary mosaic, a masterful collection of 20 interconnected short stories that blend memory, nostalgia, philosophy, and imagination into a single luminous tapestry. Set against the backdrop of Prague and infused with echoes of Borges, Hemingway, Dostoevsky, this collection becomes a journey into the heart of one man's inner life, yet manages to speak to the universal in all of us. Let's welcome Anthony, who's our special guest today and is connected with us to present his new literary work. Hi, Anthony. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ginevra. I'm happy to be with you today.
So first of all, why the title Dragonflies to this collection of stories?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, I've been asked that by a couple of people who have read the book already. They don't seem to see a connection. Dragonflies, the insects, are reportedly one of the first life forms that learned how to fly. And what's particularly interesting about them, for me, is the fact that they have a double wing structure and that those structures work kind of in relation to one another, but are nevertheless independent. And I can say that in the Dragonfly stories, this is kind of symbolic of the relationship between Ziggy, one of the characters, and the author. And one eventually learns that they're part of the same individual. And yet this is a kind of synergetic relationship that develops and somehow functions on its own. And I would say also that that similarity is kind of a basis upon which the story takes form and takes hold. And there's a relationship between the two of them, and there's a relationship to others. And all of that has a kind of similar relationship to the idea of the dragonfly and how it flies and how it functions.
All right. And how did you conceive this collection of stories? What was the inspiration to write the book?
Okay. The stories are written during COVID, at a time when I was unable to travel to see my grandchildren. And there was a time in their life when they were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, which was very formative for them. And the question was always whether we would ever be able to make a connection in a reasonable period of time that could have some formative effect. So one of the motivations for the stories came from a desire to leave a message for them. Another motivation was the fact that I was overcoming a divorce and needed to find some basis upon which I could provide some self-revalidation, I guess. You think about story number 5, which is called Promise and Pursuit. In this particular story, RJ, one of the characters, asks the author, when he's not hobbling with his cane through the Galician coast, what does he do? And he says that he's semi-retired. And as collateral damage for being semi-retired, he falls through the looking glass into the wonderland of writing. Bohumil Hrabal, who is a Czech writer from the 20th century, once said that the reason he writes is because he wants to learn about what he thinks, and that only through writing does it come to mind as to what he thinks. Joan Didion has said something similar to that, the American writer. And for me, writing these stories was not something that was conceived. It emerged on its own, independently. I was just the venue by which it came out. And in that sense, when I first read these stories, I was reading them just like any other reader was reading them, quite interestingly. So they have a very deep and special meaning for me in that they were the way in which I came to some sort of resolution of all these other motivations that needed to find a place.
Nostalgia and memory seems like these are two recurring themes throughout the book. Do you see your collection of stories as a form of emotional archaeology? I mean, digging through the past to make sense of the present.
At one point in the book, the author states that dreams are effective. I think maybe it's Ziggy who states that dreams are effective, recurring dreams are an effective effort to come to terms with the history that has not been somehow settled in your mind yet, right? Or in your emotions. And so this book is effectively, all of these stories are an effort to put into some sort of acceptable version reconciliations with the past. And I refer you to the second last story, Fantastic Voyage, which looks at the mechanics of doing that, actually.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you again for giving us an insight on this new book. We wish you, as always, best luck.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Dragonflies is a quiet triumph, a tender and intellectually stimulating work that invites readers to slow down, reflect, and rediscover the extraordinary in the ordinary. Dragonflies by Anthony Caine is now available in bookstores and digital platforms. It's a publication by Eurobox.